Welcome to Good Day Stories, where strategy meets heart. I'm your host, Gail Hataitham, founder of Good Day Creative Studio. In each episode, I sit down with changemakers from across Canada's nonprofit world to uncover how they achieve big results with limited resources. This podcast is here to help you share your story with more clarity, creativity, and confidence. Today, I'm joined by Robert John Bailot, or RJ, co-founder and executive director of the Canadian Animal Task Force. RJ leads a volunteer-driven organization that partners with First Nations and rural communities to co-create sustainable community-led solutions to pet overpopulation, improving animal welfare, public health, and community well-being in the process. Known for his collaborative and relationship-first approach, Ajay has worked alongside veterinarian associations, national nonprofits, and international partners to advance humane, systems-based population management strategies. His work has been recognized nationally, and he's shared his insight on stages across Canada and internationally. I'm so excited to explore his journey, the power of partnership-driven impact, and the communication strategies behind building trust across communities. Hi, Ajay. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here today.
Oh, I'm excited to have you here with us today as well. So we're going to get right into the questions. Can you take us back to how you first got pulled into animal welfare work? Were there early experiences that shaped how you approached this field and eventually led you to start the Canadian Animal Task Force?
So, yeah, I've always had a draw to animals. Since I was a kid, I was taking home animals, that were stray and trying to care for them. My whole upbringing, my life was really animals. And then when I became a teenager, an early young teenager, I really got involved in animal welfare and animal rights just because I saw the relationship I had with my dog and how important my animals were to me. I felt like that needed to be shared with all animals. I didn't want to just limit it to, my own dogs and cats. So it brought me down this path into animal rescue. And I started volunteering for a few organizations just to see the work that they were doing and seeing what the need was. And it was apparent to me early on that rescue was a component to the work needing to be done, but it's not the only end solution. There's other pieces for sustainability and long term. And that's where my friend and I felt it was really important that we develop something that is community driven and large scale so that we're getting to the root of the issue. And at that time, we really believed it was pet overpopulation. And one way for us to tackle that was to do high volume spay neuter clinics. And that's really what led us into beginning the Canadian Animal Task Force. At that time, we called it the Alberta Spay Neuter Task Force. But over the years, we've grown and our programs have expanded. So we've changed our name.
Wow, that's quite an inspiring journey.
Yeah, animals,
So
the human animal bond, it's such an important piece. And, when we look at this One Health model and we look at how important healthy animal populations are to communities and as well as not only to physical, like human health, but also just to mental health. And it all kind of ties together. So this is such an important piece and we really needed to do something at a large scale.
yeah, that's really cool. And I know that the Canadian Animal Task Force that you started is different from other animal organization, right? Because usually people, when they hear that, they think about shelter and rescue more than anything. So how would you describe the Canadian Animal Task Force for somebody who maybe would have heard it for the first time? And can you tell us what's the difference that you guys do?
For sure. So rescue, as I mentioned, is an important piece in all of this. And some animals do get relinquished or surrendered to us. And we partner with various organizations, shelters, and rescue groups to transfer those animals to for them to get adopted out. Our programs we're actually setting up in communities. So we work with the community to set up these large mobile kind of model spay neuter wellness clinics. So we'll have a team of upwards of 200 volunteers that will go to a community and will turn a school, gymnasium, or hockey arena into this large MASH style kind of idea veterinary clinic. So we'll see upwards of 700 animals in a weekend. So very high volume. The animals are spayed, they're neutered, they get vaccines and parasite treatment. We provide them with permanent ID, so they get a tattoo in their ear. And then we treat them for other ailments. So if they have like lacerations or eye infections, we'll send them home with antibiotics and treat them as well. So our program really are in community. We do some programs out of our office and vet hospital in Calgary, but the vast majority of our programs are actually right in the community. So to describe it without actually experiencing it is often challenging because the chaos, the organized chaos, the volume of people and animals, the sounds, the smell, it's quite a scene. And anyone who comes out for their first time, they always say, wow, this is not what I expected it to be, because it really is this well-oiled machine that is brought together, people from all over the province, sometimes neighboring provinces, to volunteer their time to come together to support the community.
Wow. Yeah. I think you did pretty well in explaining it. I feel like I can imagine. I know it's definitely a lot of work and to be involved with so many volunteers and the people in the community, and also just to have like an all-in-one service. It's it's very impressive, really, to be able to do that.
We wanted to bring services in any of our programs. We're always looking at ways to remove barriers. And in more remote communities, often access to vet care is limited. But then there's also issues such as transportation. A lot of the families we help, they don't drive or they don't have a vehicle. They may not have carriers to put their animals in. So we actually have teams, we call them our outreach teams, that go door to door in the community and actually will pick up animals for people and bring them down to our centralized location to, again, remove some of those barriers for them.
So your work really involves like the large scale spray neutral clinics and community programs, and often in First Nation communities, right? So when you entering a community to support this kind of work, what does showing up the right way look to you, and how do you build the real trust through communication?
That is so important. The communication, the relationship building, the trust, it's core to the task force beliefs and to our success. We work by invitation. So typically what happens is someone from the community, it may be someone from leadership, so one of the council members or the chief themselves. It could be someone from their health department or education department that reaches out to express concerns they have with their dog population, and we will make ourselves available to connect with who's ever interested to talk about this subject. And from there, it often just snowballs and it allows us to get access into the community and to have the trust from the community members. Sadly, over the years, there's been a lot of horrible situations where people just go into communities, they steal animals, they're not working directly with the pet owners, property owners. And for us, it's really important that we have that trust so that we could continue to provide our services in the community, but for the communities to also see the impact and want to increase the capacity and their programming because of that relationship.
Yeah, I think that's the crucial part, and I'm sure it's not that simple. It takes a lot of time, and so like, is there like a way that you communicate with the volunteers to be able to kind of build that trust among like all the 200 people that volunteering?
Yeah, so we do some volunteer when we do recruitment. We talk about some of the situations that we run into, the communities that we're supporting. What we find is that most of it comes through experience. So when our volunteers come out, we ask them to come out, with kind of an open mind and an open heart and be willing to listen and learn and kind of see. Because I think often what happens is people go into situations with, they already have an idea in their mind, and it comes with often a lot of, prejudice or like these assumptions. And when they go into communities and they see um, the excite from the members and, the gratefulness, and they see the camaraderie of our volunteer base, it just kind of empowers them to want to continue this work and to kind of shift their previous kind of thoughts they may have had around the communities that we're partnering with.
Yeah, that's really cool. The open-minded part, it's very important, but it's sometimes it's not easy for everyone, right? Like you said, like people come with some assumption, but I'm glad to hear that they be able to change their perspective just doing the volunteering and stuff.
Well, this work really, it's such emotionally driven work, and it brings people together who are really driven to help animals. People come to this work usually to help animals. But what we
Hmm.
know is that we have to support both people and animals. We can't just have it one way. This is, this full circle. And we have to kind of open our circle of compassion to include everybody and everything, and when we do that, then that's when we see a shift in the way animals are cared for. We see a shift in the way communities are willing to work with other individuals and organizations. So we really want, when people come out, we want them to see that impact, and to know that if we just go in hard into a community and say, this is what we want to do and we're going to do this, it doesn't work. It's not sustainable. It's not fair to the community because we're not really listening to what their needs are and, working with them.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. So I think your core team is relatively small, right? For the scale of the work that you're doing. So how can you help people to understand the scale of the impact that what you do without oversimplifying?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's a challenging one to answer because it is very complex, the work we do. There's several components, and it's not easy. The solution isn't easy. The answer's not easy. We're looking at so many different pieces. And really, I believe is that people just need to come with an open mind and to see the individual impact that we have. So it may not be the big picture, long term, sustainable model or image, but maybe the one family that was helped with their dog and cat and how much that meant to them. So really, it's just measuring those small or celebrating those small successes or heartwarming stories to really encourage people to want to continue to volunteer and to get other people in their lives to come out to volunteer. Because our volunteer base, really, it's often people who come from other organizations. So they may volunteer with an animal rescue group or shelter, and they hear about us through their work at another organization. So they go, oh, well, maybe I'll come out and see what this is all about. And what we found is that a lot of our volunteers are actually long-term volunteers. We have people who've been volunteering with us for over 15 years, several weekends of their summer and fall weekends to come and volunteer their time. So it's a huge commitment, tons of dedication. But when people do see that impact, they're more inclined to want to continue to this work.
Yeah. Yeah, it's volunteer based, so it's tricky because that's the important part of the organization. That's the power of it, right? Even though you work with a small core team and have to rely on the volunteer works.
We do. And it's like the all charitable sectors. We've noticed this decrease in volunteerism throughout Canada, kind of post pandemic. Everyone has shared this, that they're struggling sometimes with volunteer recruitment. And, we're no different. Thankfully, we have a very solid volunteer base that is continuing to help us, but we are always trying to recruit more people because our efforts really take a huge number of people. And like you mentioned, we have a small team. We only have 7 staff members. A clinic weekend could take upwards of 250 people. So, that's a lot of volunteer hours. And as mentioned, they're volunteers from coming all over the province. They're paying their own gas, they're paying for their own accommodation. Like, our volunteers are asked a lot, and it goes to show how dedicated they are to this cause.
Yeah, exactly. It takes a lot of heart for sure. And like the communities that you're serving, are they out in Alberta?
Our work right now is focused predominantly in Alberta. We've done a little bit of work in Saskatchewan over the years, but unfortunately the need is so large everywhere that we were starting to find that we were kind of stretching ourselves too thin. So we've been trying to just regroup and bring most of our program back into Calgary.
Yeah, maybe that's for the future project, right? So talking about free roaming pets or population management and public safety can be very sensitive. How do you frame those conversation so they are respectful, clear, and inviting rather than defensive for some people?
Yeah, that's great. That's a great question because it is such a divisive subject at times, quite contentious, and there's so many pieces to it again. What we know is that short-term action is not sustainable. So we know that removing dogs from a community is not the solution. We know euthanizing or calling dogs is not a long-term solution. But we also recognize that communities, especially if they're quite remote, are limited to the resources they have. So it's very easy to get angry with a community for an action that they follow through with. But we don't really could relate to it because we're fortunate to be surrounded by resources. So we really just take a very soft approach in that we want to meet communities as to where they're at and kind of share our experiences with them of what we've seen working and not working. And what we've found is that most times communities are looking for people who are kind of experts in this area to give some guidance and support. You know, like I said, we could be considered experts in this area, but we still haven't solved it. Like there's so many pieces to it. So we always encourage humane action. So any of our programs are humane. We're looking for community engagement. So there's a community buy-in and sustainability. And we're always looking long term. So yes, our spay neuter clinics have an impact for the immediate animal population, but on their own, they're not a solution. There needs to be other programs in place that are community led that are going to actually impact animal welfare, public safety, and overall dog populations. So spay neuter is one major piece in what we do, but it's not the only piece. And we do work with communities to help develop these more community driven dog management programs. So we look at things like legislation, we look at community engagement and knowledge sharing. We look at community safety presentations, how to avoid dog bites. So there's so many pieces, and the spay neuter is just one of those tools.
Yeah, it just takes a lot of like all hands on deck to solve the problem because it's like you said, it's very complex. And I'm glad to hear that you're really focusing on the roots of the problem because otherwise this would never get solved, even though focusing on that is still taking a lot of effort and time and a lot of compassion for sure to be able to build the trust and the communication and the relationships and all that. I'm just impressed with how much that you guys can do, how much that you guys are doing for the community.
Well, thank you. It's patience is key in this. It's challenging because no one wants to see anyone suffer or animals suffer, and we want these quick solutions. And I'm guilty of this. I'm always wanting more to happen quicker and to see larger impact. And I've finally have accepted that these things like change takes time. And you know, it's so cliche, you hear it all the time. But when you're really doing this grassroots work, you want to see things happen quicker. And sometimes it's really important just to slow down and to remind yourself again of those small victories, the little impacts, so that you have the ability, the headspace and mental capacity to continue this work and really see it through.
Yeah, exactly. So you work with local rescues, First Nation communities, and municipalities. Can you share a story where collaboration made a big difference on the ground and what you learned about communicating and working together in that moment?
Yeah, there's so many examples because our organization has been built through collaboration. You know, when we started, it was just a couple of friends and I, and we were really just trying to bring people together. So the entire success of our organization, I won't even say success, just the growth and the stability of our organization has been built through collaboration and communicating with other people in this kind of field. A good example that I often am reminded of as to the good work that's happening is our partnership with a group called ARCS, the Alberta Animal Rescue Crew Society. Years ago, the task force, were called in to help in the fires in Fort McMurray. And following that fire, our friends at ARCS and the task force formed a formal partnership, and we started an organization of the two organizations that respond to disasters. So since that, our groups have worked together to deal with various animal hoarding cases. We've gone out to various fires together, and it's just kind of pooling our resources together in the same, end goal. And it's really allowed our teams to do more. And it's good because like we need that collaboration. We don't need to be all working in our own silos all the time. Like it's great that groups are working together and sharing resources so that we have a greater impact.
Yeah, that's a cool story. What partnership can make such big impact in the communities. So looking back, what's one mindset shift or communication habit you had to grow into as the leader? Something that maybe you would tell your earlier self if you could?
Well, I guess patience would be one. And just listening to everyone at the table and really entering a situation without already having your mind made up, seeing where they're at and kind of going from there. Because it's very easy when you're doing something so often to expect your program to kind of be the way things need to go in every scenario. And that's not the case. There's often a lot of similarities amongst communities or situations we've entered, but there are differences. And it just listening to people at the table, being patient, recognizing that things take a very long time to change, especially when we're thinking about people's perceptions and the way they see things. So it's just patience, and yeah, just again having an open mind.
Yeah, I like that advice. Listening, being patient, having an open minded. These are all really great qualities for a good leader. Thank you.
And it's taken me a long time, and I still get reminded of it. I think of how I was when I was, in my early 20s and when I was a late teenager in this area. And I was far quicker to have a very strong opinion on something and to judge a situation or an individual based on the situation that we were dealt with. And I've constantly am reminding myself to take a step back, consider what that individual or that community has faced and their challenges before I kind of come in hot and go, oh gosh, this is awful. And I see it now with people that, I will be in a situation that maybe volunteers that will come in very hot to a situation. And it's cool to see the progress in individuals when they've been involved for so long that they've realized, like, wait a second, I need to kind of check myself. I need to really listen to what's going on and then figure out how I could, where my place is in all of this.
Yeah, thank you for that. I feel like sometimes, like when you have so much passion about something, it's also make you sometimes easy to judge other people as well because it's just the way that you think strongly about something, right? So
Absolutely.
that's something that we just need to always check in and see where that came from.
Yeah,
hmm
absolutely.
So, for leaders listening who are also trying to build programs that are inclusive and rooted in community voice, what's one communication practice or principle that has made the biggest difference in your work?
It's for us, it's a lot of our communication is sharing positive stories. I find that when we are positive, it really creates this domino effect of people wanting to take part of this. When I look at the animal welfare sector, kind of a general view of it, often the things that we see are very negative, very sad, and it could be discouraging to people. And it creates sometimes, hostility, volatility, like people just get angry. And we want people to feel excited, empowered, encouraged. So for me, really, it comes down to our communication needs to be positive. It could still show realities, but show how we can make a difference so we don't feel deflated or, discouraged. I think that would be really the biggest piece is just being positive about the work that we do while also being transparent, but not to always be, like that Debbie Downer. And we want people to join us in this work. I think in relation to community engagement and communication, there's so many different kind of tools. And for us, it's just making ourselves available. So when a community reaches out, we'll either go in person. So we have to travel a great distance to meet in person. We're happy to do that. We'll do, video calls. We just make ourselves available and listen and do our best to support the communities with what it is that they're looking for support.
Finally, is there a story or moment from the field that sticks with you? One that sums up why this work matters and how communication play a role in making it successful.
Yeah, again, there's so many stories that I could share. One that always comes to mind, especially in relationship to the human animal bond and the importance of the work we do, was actually during the floods years ago. Our team was sent up to support the folk in Siksika Nation. And I remember we were in a boat because several houses were underwater, and our team were in boats going to collect dogs from people's rooftops because that's the only place the dogs were able to stay safe. And there was a family, and you could see them way far up on a hill, and they watched as the water kind of took everything they owned and they lost everything. And their dog was still alive, and he was on the house, and the water level was getting really right up to the top. Like, that dog had very little time left to remain safe. So we were able to get to that house in our boat and got the dog in. And I remember when we got to shore, just the pure relief this family had, the tears and how excited they were to be reunited with their dog. And, they lost everything. And it was just that reminder that animals play such a huge role in our lives and they really impact us. And it's so important that we celebrate and honor and encourage and support the human animal bond relationship. And that one for me is something that's always stuck with me because it shows why it was important that we were there and why this work we do needs to continue and expand. And those relationships, why they're so important, because if we didn't have that relationship with Siksika Nation, we wouldn't have been called out there. And because we had a long-standing relationship with their nation, they reached out to us right away when they needed that support.
That's a beautiful story and yeah, such a good reminder of like the important work that you do, definitely. So RJ, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing not just the work of the Canadian Animal Task Force, but the heart and the thinking behind it all, the stories. And what really stands out is the reminder that meaningful change doesn't start with programs, it starts with relationships, with small steps. As you said, celebrating the small wins. The way you've centered partnership and trust in the communities shows that communication isn't just a tool for nonprofits, right? It's a foundation of sustainable impact. So for those listening, if today's conversation sparks something for you, whether it's rethinking how you approach partnerships, how you tell your impact story, or how you show up in the community, we encourage you to learn more about the Canadian Animal Task Force and the work that they're doing via their website, which I will include in the show notes. And as always, if you found value in this episode, share it with a fellow changemaker, leave us a comment or subscribe so you don't miss future conversation with leaders building impact from the inside out. And that's a wrap on another Gooder story. Until next time, keep making stories worth sharing.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.